Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, 200 million records sold. In 1999, they were the two biggest pop acts on earth, and one man built them both, a heavyset guy from Queens who called himself the sixth member. In 2008, that man was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. He died in a cell in 2016, still owing the money. The headlines called it the boy band scam. The filing said something else. 1,800 savers, most of them retired, more than $1 billion. Because Lou Pearlman was not a music mogul who drifted into fraud. He was a fraud who needed a boy band. The bands were real. The records were real. The screaming was real. All of it was the costume. Underneath was a Ponzi scheme that ran for 20 years, the longest anyone in America had ever run. The boy bands weren't the business. They were the brochure. The coroner's report comes at the end. Chapter 1. The blimp that crashed into a garbage dump. To understand the fraud, don't start with the music. Start with a blimp. Lou Pearlman grew up in Queens, New York, heavy-set, lonely, and genuinely obsessed with airships. His cousin was Art Garfunkel. So Lou watched fame arrive for somebody else, up close, early. At Queens College, he wrote a business plan for a helicopter taxi service. Then he went out and launched it. With one helicopter. That's the first thing to understand about him. He was not lazy and he was not stupid. He was relentless. But he wanted blimps. So he talked his way to Germany, to an airship man named Theodore Kemper, and learned the business at his facilities. Then he came home and did the thing he would keep doing for the next 30 years. He let people believe he had a partnership with the German manufacturer. He didn't, but the implication raised the money, and the money built the blimp. Sit with that for a second. His very first deal was a lie about a relationship that didn't exist. Everything after this is the same move, at bigger and bigger scale. He landed a sponsor, Jordache Jeans, their name on his airship over New York City. On its maiden voyage, the gold paint overheated. The blimp came down in a garbage dump. A normal person is finished here. Pearlman sued Jordache for $2.5 million. And he won. Read that again. The blimp crashed, and he got paid. He used that money to launch a company called Airship International and took it public in 1985. Airship International has since been described as a pump and dump. A penny stock talked up, then sold off. Then his blimps started crashing. 3 of them in short order. The company collapsed, and Pearlman collected the insurance. A former associate later claimed he had staged those crashes for the payouts. That was never proven and never charged, and it's only fair to say so. But look at the shape of the decade. Every time the thing failed, a check arrived. Here's the lesson, and it explains the entire man. He never needed the business to work. He needed it to look like it worked, long enough to get paid. The blimp didn't have to fly. It had to be photographed, which is a very strange skill to have, unless what you build next is a boy band. Chapter 2. The sixth member. In the early 90s, Pearlman got a phone call that changed his life. Someone wanted to charter one of his aircraft. That someone was New Kids on the Block. He saw what they were earning, he compared it to what a blimp earned, and he decided he was in the wrong business. Now, this is where he deserves real credit, because he earned it. Pearlman didn't stumble into the boy bands. He engineered them. He advertised in Orlando. He auditioned kids. He funded them himself for years before a single record sold. The coaches, the choreographers, the housing, all of it. He backed them when nobody else would. In 1993, that produced the Backstreet Boys. When they exploded, he did it again, deliberately and immediately, and produced NSYNC. He was right. That's what makes this a tragedy rather than a joke. The man had a real eye and real nerve, and he built 2 of the biggest acts in the history of pop music. And then he wrote the contracts. Pearlman made himself the 6th member of the band. That's not a metaphor. It was in the paperwork. He took 1/6 of the profits as though he were up there singing. And then on top of that, he took a management fee. So he was the manager taking his cut, and he was the band taking a share. He sat on both sides of every deal, negotiating with himself. When the members of NSYNC opened their first checks, each one was for $10,000. The Backstreet Boys got there first. By 1998, the band had received $300,000 total since 1993. In the same window, Pearlman had made 10 million. 5 young men, 5 years, the biggest act on the planet, $300,000 between them, and their 6th member took 10 million. So Brian Littrell hired a lawyer. Remember that. It matters more than anyone knew at the time. In 1999, NSYNC sued too, fraud and misrepresentation, and fired him. Pearlman's company and BMG immediately sued the band back for $150 million to stop them performing under their own name. Sit with that one. He tried to take the name. They settled. NSYNC won their name. And the Backstreet settlement? Pearlman walked away with $30 million and kept a slice of their profits. He lost the lawsuit and got richer. Everyone read this as greed, and greed is the obvious answer. But greed gets satisfied. A man just handed $30 million off an act he no longer has to lift a finger for, should be a happy man. He wasn't. He needed more immediately, and he needed it from somewhere else entirely. That's not greed. That's a symptom. Chapter 3, the savings account that wasn't. Lou Pearlman owned a company called Transcontinental Airlines. It had a name, an office, letterhead, and a logo. What it mostly didn't have was an airline. Here's how thin it actually was. The photograph Pearlman used to sell the whole thing, the picture of the aircraft, the proof of the fleet, was a toy plane, a model, off his own dresser. Somebody held it up in front of a runway and took the shot. In the version the investors saw, the hand had been cropped out. There it is again. The plane didn't have to fly. It had to be photographed. What Transcontinental had instead of an airline was a savings program. It was called the Employee Investment Savings Account. Here's the plain version. You handed Transcontinental your money like a savings account at a bank. It paid you a guaranteed rate of interest, 8%, better than your bank. And the whole pitch rested on one word, insured. FDIC insured, backed by AIG, backed by Lloyd's of London. Every part of that was false. The FDIC insures banks. Transcontinental was not a bank. It could no more be FDIC insured than your barber could. So Pearlman forged the documents, FDIC paperwork, AIG paperwork, Lloyd's of London paperwork. He manufactured the proof. And when he needed real banks to lend him real money, he handed them audited financial statements from an accounting firm called Cohen & Siegel. Cohen & Siegel did not exist. He invented the auditor. He invented the firm whose entire job was to check whether he was lying. And when investigators finally traced the phone number on Cohen & Siegel's letterhead, it rang through to an answering service. The answering service forwarded to a machine. The voice on the machine was Lou Pearlman. He was the auditor. He was the man the auditor was auditing. And the fees his victims paid for that audit went to him. That's the detail I want you to hold on to. Most fraud hides from the auditors. Pearlman built one and answered its phone. There's one more, and it's the one that tells you he knew exactly what he was doing. In 1999, Lloyd's of London worked out that a man in Orlando was using their name to sell savings accounts. They sent him a cease and desist letter. He kept using their name anyway. He wasn't caught out by that. He was told in writing by one of the oldest insurance houses on earth to stop, and he carried on because by then he couldn't stop. We'll get to why. So who bought this? About 1,800 people, not institutions, not hedge funds, individuals, a great many of them elderly retirees in Florida, handing over their savings for a safe, boring, insured account. When the judge eventually listed the victims in court, he described them as Pearlman's family, his close friends, and people in their 70s and 80s who had lost their life savings. He sold it to his own family, and it ran for roughly 20 years. When they finally found it, it was the longest-running Ponzi scheme in American history, which leaves one question worth actually answering. Why did anybody believe him? A savings account at an airline with no planes, insured by an agency that doesn't insure airlines, audited by a firm that doesn't exist. Every single piece of it collapses on the first phone call. Nobody made the phone call. And in the spring of 2000, Lou Pearlman found out exactly why. Chapter 4, the fatal win. On March 21st, 2000, NSYNC released an album called No Strings Attached. It sold 2.4 million copies in a week, not a month, a week. That record stood for 15 years. Backstreet Boys and NSYNC were at that moment the two biggest acts on the planet, and Lou Pearlman had built both of them. He was in the magazines, he was on television, he was the man with the golden ear, the guy who found them. This was the win of his life. It was also the moment he was already dead. He just had a few more good years before he'd find out. Here's the reframe. It changes everything you've watched so far. Look again at that $10 million. The number that made the Backstreet Boys sue him. 10 million. Hold it. He stole more than $1 billion. So did the Division. The biggest boy band on earth at the absolute peak of the biggest pop moment in 30 years produced about 1% of what he was taking from savers. 1%. The bands were never the money. They could never have been the money. They were the reason people believed there was money. That's the whole scheme. And now you can see it. When a heavyset businessman from Queens tells a 74-year-old in Orlando that his airline runs a savings program, she asks for the paperwork. When the man who made NSYNC tells her, she asks where to sign. He didn't build the boy bands to get rich off the boy bands. He got rich off them, certainly, but that was the small crime, and it was almost a side effect. He built them because fame is the one asset that makes people stop checking. The bands were the character reference. The platinum records on his wall were the audit, and he knew it. That's the part that removes any doubt, because in 2000, that same year, Lou Pearlman put himself on television, a show called Making the Band. ABC first, then MTV. Cameras followed him assembling a group out of nothing. It produced O-Town. It also produced something worth far more to him, a country watching Lou Pearlman be the man who makes stars every week on a schedule. He wasn't chasing celebrity for the sake of it. He was manufacturing the credential in public. Then he spent it. Investors got the limo, they got the private jet, and then they got the tour. Walked through his building, past the studio, where the biggest band in the world happened to be rehearsing. That's not a metaphor about brochures, that's a showroom. He was walking retirees past NSYNC and then handing them a savings form. Nobody asks a man for his audited financials while they can hear NSYNC through the wall. That's why the lawsuits didn't stop him. That's why $30 million didn't satisfy him. The bands were never the payday. They were the credential. And the credential is the only reason a fake savings account could grow into $1 billion. So here is the fatal win in one line. The thing that made Lou Pearlman famous is the only reason the fraud could get that big. And it is the only reason it ever got caught. Chapter 5. The Thread. Because fame cuts both ways. And Brian Littrell had hired that lawyer. When you sue a man like Pearlman, you don't just get a settlement, you get discovery. You get trained accountants inside his paperwork with a court order and a reason to look. And the moment anyone qualified looked at Transcontinental, the question started. Where are the planes? Who exactly are Cohen and Siegel? Why does this FDIC letter look like that? But watch what the lawsuits did to the machine itself. Because it's worse than exposure. NSYNC left. Backstreet left. The acts that made him credible walked out the door, and nothing replaced them. O-Town and the rest never came close. And a Ponzi scheme has no brakes. This is the part people never quite absorb. A Ponzi has no revenue. So the interest check you're owed this month can only come from the deposit somebody else makes this month. Every payment out is somebody's payment in. The day new money stops arriving is the day the whole thing stops. So it can't shrink. It can't coast. It can't take one quiet year. It has to grow forever faster until it's caught. Which means that at the exact moment Pearlman lost his credibility engine, he needed more savers than he'd ever needed before. He was out selling the story of the boy band king while the boy bands were in court trying to get away from him. He wasn't greedy at the end. He was trapped by his own arithmetic. In 2006, investigators found it. In February 2007, Florida regulators declared the Transcontinental Savings Program exactly what it was, and the state took possession of the company. And Lou Pearlman ran, Germany first, then Indonesia. In June 2007, they found him in Bali. Chapter 6. The Autopsy. In 2008, Lou Pearlman pleaded guilty, conspiracy, money laundering, making false statements in a bankruptcy proceeding. He was sentenced to 25 years, the maximum, but the judge attached an offer to it. Judge G. Kendall Sharp told him that for every $1 million he returned to his victims, a month would come off the sentence. Do that arithmetic. Pearlman certainly did. 300 million returned would be 300 months. 25 years. The entire sentence, erased. He had a mathematical road out of prison, priced in the only currency he had ever dealt in. Give the money back and walk out. He died in there. From prison, he gave an interview claiming his scheme had been smarter than Bernie Madoff's. He was still selling. There was nobody left to buy, and he was still selling. On August 19, 2016, Lou Pearlman died in federal custody. He was 62. More than $400 million has still never been found. Whether he couldn't produce it or simply wouldn't, the result is identical. And it's the last thing the man ever told us. He would rather serve every year of it than open the box. So let's do the autopsy properly. The headline said Lou Pearlman was the man who scammed the boy bands. That's true. It's also the least of it. Those 5 young men had lawyers, leverage, and the rest of their lives. They sued. They won their names back. They are still filling stadiums today. The 1800 had none of that. They had a brochure with a famous man's face on it, an insurance logo he had forged, and an auditor he had invented. They were retired. They were in their 70s and 80s. Some of them were his friends. Some of them were family. They didn't get a settlement. They got a place on a creditor list. And here's the lesson to carry out of this one. We remember the fraud with the famous victims. And the famous victims are exactly why the real fraud survived 20 years. Every headline about the boy bands was free advertising for a savings account that didn't exist. The noise was the cover. So when a man shows you fame as a credential, be clear about what you're being shown. Fame is not an audit. A photograph is not a financial statement. The man in the picture with NSYNC and the man forging a Lloyd's of London letter were the same man, same room, same afternoon. He never needed the business to work. He only needed it to look like it worked, long enough to get paid. He learned that on a blimp in a garbage dump in 1980. He just kept doing it for 30 more years, until the people he was doing it to were pensioners. Out of business, transcontinental, seized by the state of Florida, February 2007. Cause of death, a savings account that never existed, sold by a man everybody had seen standing next to NSYNC. Lou Pearlman died in a federal prison cell in 2016. The money never came back. If you want the other side of this coin, a fraud with no famous faces at all, just $11 billion in a spreadsheet, watch WorldCom Scandal, America's biggest accounting fraud. Same lie, no music. Every company on this channel is dead or dying. We do the autopsy. Subscribe before the next collapse.